Tonight, we take a closer look at South Korea's chip industry and its prospects. It's because the nation's key export item seems to be going through a hard time in recent months as external factors increase their burden. For more on this topic, we have our business correspondent Lee Rae-hyun here with us in the studio. Good evening, Rae-hyun.
Good evening, Jung-min.
So just tell us about the challenges that the chip industry is facing right now.
Right, as you've mentioned, South Korea's chip industry is seeing a sharp downturn since the second half of last year. So according to a data released by the Trade Ministry, chip exports dropped 42.5% on year in February. It also saw a drop 44.5% in January. As you can see here, the downward trend has been continuing since last August when an on-year drop of 7.8% was recorded. Because of this, chip inventory jumped 28% in January from a month earlier to the highest level in almost 26 years. Compared to a year earlier, stockpiles have increased 39.5%. Chip companies have also been hit hard. SK Hynix, one of South Korea's biggest chip makers, saw a deficit of more than $1.2 billion in the fourth quarter of 2022. This was the first deficit that the company had seen in 10 years. Samsung Electronics' chip sector operating profits were also hit, plunging 97% on year for the same period to about $204 million.
And Rae-hyun, so what are some of the factors that are adding increasing chip industry's concerns?
Right, so one of the central issues right now is U.S. CHIPS Act. The act is basically an effort by the U.S. to become the center of the global chip supply chain by giving benefits to chip companies that are willing to decouple from China and set up manufacturing facilities in the U.S. The Biden administration last week announced 6 requirements needed to access the $39 billion of funding for companies building chip plants in the U.S. But the problem is that some of the strings attached are an obstacle for Korean companies. For example, so-called guardrail provisions, which state that companies receiving subsidies may not build new plants in China nor invest in their current facilities on the mainland for the next 10 years. Companies also have to share some of their unexpected excess profits with the U.S. government, provide access to production facilities, and take part in U.S. research and development projects. Take a listen.
Taxpayer money, the American people, public investment in private industry of a size and scale without recent precedent. And the people of America deserve transparency and accountability.
So basically, it won't be easy for companies to secure their trade secrets if they decide to get subsidies. Moreover, South Korean chip giants like SK Hynix and Samsung produce almost half of their memory chips in China, which is deepening the industry's worries.
And how are they coping with the challenges?
Right, so there were some signs of silver lining that might help the industry revive. On Monday, the Trade Ministry announced that South Korea and Japan will hold talks regarding the lifting of export controls on chip manufacturing materials. The Japanese Trade Ministry says it will resume talks on export curbs imposed in 2019, which some experts forecast will be helpful for stabilizing the supply chain. Meanwhile, South Korea's Minister for Trade left for Washington, D.C. yesterday to discuss the CHIPS Act with top officials of the U.S., where he will bring up issues regarding the 6 requirements for subsidies and possibly come up with countermeasures. President Yoon Suk-yeol also plans to meet U.S. President Joe Biden next month, where the U.S. CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act are likely to be on the table. Some industry insiders say at least the adaptation of the guardrail provision should be postponed for South Korea. Take a listen.
There's a low possibility that the U.S. has considered South Korea's chip industry. So, Korean companies should proactively talk with the U.S. while the government compromises it as a diplomatic issue. It's important to cooperate with the U.S. and the neighboring countries for friend-shoring chips.
And the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea said on Tuesday that it plans to propose tax credits of up to 30% for companies investing in chip production in the coming weeks, adding to the government's tax break bill submitted to the National Assembly in January. Now all eyes are on whether this will actually be implemented.
All eyes are on. All right, Rae-hyun, thank you for your report.
My pleasure.